The BBC may have gone to even greater lengths than previously realised to silence former Match of the Day host Gary Lineker on Gaza. Lineker stepped down from his BBC role in an emotional final show last week. The former footballer and flagship presenter has consistently spoken out in support of the Palestinian people over Israel's genocide in Gaza. Lineker's 26-year relationship ended earlier than planned over controversy surrounding a post he shared on social media about Zionism that included a rat emoji, something he repeatedly apologised for. But over the weekend, reports emerged that Lineker was blocked from carrying out a final interview just before his departure. A source told the Sun newspaper that a planned interview with Liverpool star and Egypt national team captain Mo Salah was cancelled due to fears that Lineker and Salah would talk about Israel's genocide in Gaza. The insider said this: "The plan was for the interview to be shown across the BBC the weekend of Gary's final match of the day. That would include on Football Focus the day before, as well as online and on social media. Out of nowhere, it got cancelled. Some people think they didn't want Gary and Mo to talk about Gaza. Salah has spoken out in his support for Palestinians living in Gaza, and Gary has made his feelings clear too. It felt like it may have been something that came up naturally in conversation. It seems they axed it rather than risk possible editorial issues. They'd only just overcome one storm, so to face another would have been a nightmare." One response on X was particularly interesting. This is what sports journalist Layla Hamed posted. "So Gary Lineker's interview with Mo Salah was cancelled over fears they'd mentioned Gaza. Silencing two of the biggest voices in football just to protect Israel from criticism isn't journalism, it's complicity in genocide." Quite right. If they're saying something which is true, what's the problem precisely? They can't have a platform precisely because they might say something which is true. The BBC's double standard on sports interviews that discuss the impact of war and conflict appears to be laid bare here, as the broadcaster had absolutely no issue with Gary Lineker, the same Gary Lineker, interviewing then Manchester City defender Alexander Zinchenko 3 years ago. Here's what they discussed.
When you see the images of the destruction of the cities in Ukraine at the moment, what goes through your mind?
I'm just crying. I promise you, I'm just crying. It's already a week, I'm not counting, but even I can drive the car from the training ground, or it doesn't matter where I can just cry from nothing, because it is everything in my head. Imagine the place where you was born, when you was growing up, and there is just empty ground.
It's very difficult to imagine, but it's actually happening to you and your family and your people.
I cannot imagine the people which is over there at the moment and they are surviving. I cannot imagine the feelings from them, honestly, because I know a lot of things which probably don't know the rest of the world, because I have a lot of friends there and a lot of people from different cities, and they're sending me the facts. The people starving there, the people sleeping on the ground, in bunkers, wherever. They cannot live proper life.
Does it also make you feel proud of your people, the way they've stood up?
I'm so proud to be Ukrainian, and I will be forever, for the rest of my life.
Here's a question for you. Now answer seriously, for people watching and listening. Do you think the BBC would platform a footballer saying precisely the same things about Gaza? They could be Palestinian or not. Mo Salah's Egyptian. Egypt borders Gaza, has a literal border crossing with Gaza. Do you think the BBC would platform that? And if they did, what do you think the response would be from parts of the media? And the political parties too, let's be honest. If he was saying precisely the same things that Zinchenko was just saying there. Well, we know what the answer is, of course. We know what the answer is. And the BBC has aided and abetted that double standard, if this story is to be believed. Lineker is using his departure from the BBC to focus on his podcasting business, Goalhanger Podcasts. Lineker's The Rest is Football podcast was dropped by the BBC, but has quickly been snapped up for a new partnership with British streaming platform DAZN. DAZN has the exclusive broadcasting rights to FIFA's Club World Cup tournament this summer. Harriet, has the BBC shot itself in the foot?
Yeah, it absolutely has, Aaron. There's no two ways about it there. yeah, we're not going to debate it. Gary Lineker is the host of the most popular sports podcast in the UK with the Rest is Football podcast. In terms of consumer numbers, it is the most popular sports podcast in Britain. And there's a reason why Gary Lineker was such a popular host and why he was such a highly paid and influential flagship BBC presenter. I mean, there's a whole other debate we could get into in terms of whether very high BBC presenters' salaries can be justified, but Gary Lineker is a highly talented presenter. Of course, his podcast was going to get snapped up. The BBC really have shot themselves in the foot there. And in terms of if this story in The Sun from a BBC source is to be believed, in terms of the BBC double standards, it's been said before, but it bears repeating, that people like Jeremy Clarkson and Andrew Neil were able to air their personal political views while also working for the BBC for years and years and years. Somebody like Rachel Riley was able to use her platform to repeatedly, and in my opinion, completely disgustingly, attack Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, calling him a racist. And she was able to keep her job on Countdown. That was okay. And from Gary Lineker himself, let's not forget that in 2022, he hosted the BBC's Qatar World Cup coverage. And in his own opening speech, he criticised Qatar for its human rights abuses. But speaking out against Israel is a different story. Like you can't highlight human rights abuses of Israel without having to, terminate your relationship with the BBC. I know part of it was over that controversial post with the emoji that he took down and then apologised for. But this is Lineker's termination of his relationship with the BBC is inextricably linked to Gaza. And I think that what this story coming out today about the cancellation of his final interview with Mo Salah, it just shows the real failure of journalistic standards from the BBC and their lack of integrity when it comes to coverage of Israel.
Yeah, you said some really important points there, right? So the BBC is happy. It's happy for Gary Lineker, the presenter of its flagship show, to criticise Qatar. So you can criticise Qatar. Let's be honest as well, you also criticised Jeremy Corbyn quite a lot during the Brexit years. So you can criticise the leader of the opposition. You can get involved in domestic politics, right? You can criticise Qatar. You can criticise Russia, of course. But you can't criticise Israel. And by the way, what kind of environment do you think allows anti-Semitism to flourish? When you have a national broadcaster, so you can criticize everybody, including politicians here, but don't criticize Israel. How do you think people will respond? Do you think that's going to create a healthy culture of debate in regards to foreign policy? I don't think that.